I'd like to introduce Jenny Baker. It's my absolute honor to introduce this wonderful woman. Jenny joined the Theosophical Society in 1981. She attended her first summer school in 1989 and has been the director of the school since 2007. She's served on numerous committees at headquarters and is currently our national president and much loved. She is a member of the Executive Committee of the General Council and a council member of the International Theosophical Centre at Naden. She is a national and international speaker and has given talks at Naden and Adya. I give you Jenny.
Thank you, Teresa. The title of my talk is Living in Harmony with Yourself and the Planet. The magnificent work, the Bhagavad Gita in the Homeostasis translation, has many mentions of harmony and self-harmony. One is, and I quote, "The man who lives in self-harmony finds wisdom, stroke truth in his soul." And the other is, "Let the wise man work unselfishly for the good of the world." From these statements, it is clear that harmony starts from the inner being and works towards the outer, wider world. How do we achieve self-harmony in a world that in many respects is less than harmonious? And how should we transfer that inner harmony to the sentient world? These questions I hope to address in this talk, at least to some degree. The title for this Congress, Healing Oneself, Healing the World, implies that neither we, humankind, nor the planet we live on are well. This is only partially true, as there are many well people and many parts of the world that are healthy. But we are all aware of the coronavirus that has been around now for 2.5 years and has caused many people worldwide to be ill or even to die. The lockdown restrictions that were imposed to try to stop the spread of the virus were reasonably effective, as was the development and administration of vaccines. Undoubtedly, lives were saved, but it is known that the restrictions have had adverse effects on some people's mental health. Whether or not we have contracted COVID-19, we acknowledge that our lives have been changed in some way or another. In the spring of 2020, a very strict lockdown was imposed in the UK. Most people stayed at home, aeroplanes were grounded, and only essential traffic was on the roads. The result was that within weeks, the air pollution was notably reduced, and wild animals, such as goats, ventured into deserted town centres, and birdsong could be heard in its full glory. It was as if the earth had taken a deep breath and smiled. It had other effects too. Many people who were unable to go to the gym, play golf or tennis, took to walking in the countryside for their exercise. This has become so popular that some of our beauty spots are now becoming overcrowded. Over 2 years have now passed and restrictions are no longer in place. People are taking foreign holidays once again. And apart from the fact that some office workers still prefer to work from home, life has returned to pre-pandemic days. The coronavirus will never be eliminated, but we learn to live with it. So, does humanity require healing? And if so, how do we go about it? When I did my nursing training, as well as learning about diseases and how to look after ill people, we were taught anatomy and physiology. The anatomy and physiology, was repeated 20 years later when I did my yoga teacher training, and 20 years after that when I did my yoga therapy training. I found it fascinating learning how the human body works, how the different systems and organs work together to keep the body healthy. Each system is separate, but works symbiotically with other systems to achieve homeostasis, which we can consider a form of self-harmony. What does homeostasis mean? The word homeostasis was coined in 1930 by a physician called Walter Cannon. It comes from two Greek words meaning same and steady, and is currently defined as a self-regulating process by which biological systems maintain stability while adjusting to changing external conditions. It refers to any process used by living things to actively keep stable conditions necessary for survival. It typically involves negative feedback loops that counteract changes of various properties from their target values, and these are known as set points. Homeostasis is the way the body keeps its inner equilibrium when conditions change. Some examples of this are how the internal body temperature is maintained in extreme conditions. Another is the regulation of blood sugar levels. Another, defending against viruses and bacteria. And the triggering of the fight or flight response to actual or perceived danger. When the body has perfect balance and harmony, there is no need for any reaction. But as soon as an imbalance occurs, the body naturally seeks to return everything to normal once again. For instance, the act of breathing we all do unconsciously all day and night. However, we can override the natural breathing process and change the speed, the force, and the depth of our breathing at will. But it is not possible to hold one's breath for very long because sensors detect excessive carbon dioxide in the bloodstream and send messages to the part of the brain that deals with breathing. This triggers a message to be relayed to the diaphragm and intercostal muscles to instigate breathing once more. And I've got here, one cannot commit suicide by holding your breath. Your body won't let you do it. Right, the body also has very effective defense systems to prevent antigens from gaining access. The first is the skin, now considered to be the largest organ of the body. It is waterproof, and unless it is cut, stops germs from invading the body. The immune system is another example of several systems joining together to fight diseases. I could give you more examples of negative feedback loops operating within the human body, but this is not the time for an anatomy and physiology lesson. You'll be pleased to know. Just to say that the body is a very clever organism and heals itself naturally, but occasionally has help from doctors, surgeons, nurses, health workers, and complementary therapists, of which there are many these days. So why does humanity need healing? There are many complex answers to this question. One reason we are in the state we are in, I would suggest, is that in the Western world, there is far too much emphasis on materialism. A world in which the desire for more wealth, more possessions, and to be better than our neighbors is paramount. It is a superficial world of relative reality only. Eventually, materialism does not lead to happiness, but only to dissatisfaction and stress-induced illnesses. Materialism brings with it negative emotions such as selfishness, greed, egotism, which can lead to the desire for power. This in turn can lead to anger and aggression and much suffering of innocent people. There is no doubt that mental illness is increasing. There is far more anxiety and depression amongst youngsters these days. And sadly, in this country, a dearth of trained professionals to cope with the increasing load. If homeostasis plays a part in physical well-being, can it do the same for our mental problems? How do we achieve mental well-being? How can we bring harmony and balance to a depressed or anxious person? To my mind, there are two important ways to tackle the problem. The first is to discover the cause of the depression or anxiety, and then to try to rectify it. And the second is to encourage exercise and being in contact with the natural world. The exercise I would recommend would be gentle yoga or Tai Chi. For these disciplines start with the physical body activity, but reach a deeper level. They connect the body with the mind and the mind with the body through the right use of breath. This can be thought of as a form of homeostasis and a way to bring balance and harmony to someone's life. It is well known that being in the countryside and out in the fresh air is very therapeutic, as is gardening or anything that allows us to be in contact with the earth. They bring us back in touch with nature. Another remedy I would suggest is to encourage an attitude of caring for others. For doing something for someone else is rewarding, and anything that is rewarding is not only satisfying, but helps to combat feelings of separation. It is easy to define physical well-being, perhaps not quite so easy to define mental well-being, but how would we define spiritual well-being? Is there such a thing as spiritual health? And if there is, it implies spiritual ill health. While pondering this question, I came across a study that was published in the Journal of Medical Ethics and History of Medicines in April 2018. It was conducted by the Research Center of Tehran University and Medical Sciences. The study was into spiritual health and was run by scientists and researchers. It involved 22 experts in various fields of spiritual health, including ethics, philosophy, theology, medicine, psychiatry, psychology, and health and mental ethics. All had written articles or books or given lectures in the field of spiritual health. Spiritual health was examined from different angles and various definitions were proposed, but it was concluded that a comprehensive definition of the term does not exist. What was decided was that spiritual health can be defined in 3 dimensions, which are 1, religious, 2, individualistic, and 3, orientation to the material world. The study revealed 4 types of connection in spiritual health. The first is the human connection with God. The second is the connection of man with himself. The third is the connection he has with others. And the fourth is the connection between man and nature. Of these, the first, the connection with God, was thought to be the most important. Different characteristics for spiritual health were considered, including the domination and effect it has on physical health and on mental health and on social health. The study considered the religious approach to spiritual health and whether it is perceptible in people's behavior and if it can be enhanced or improved. When asked if there was a difference between spiritual health and spirituality, most participants agreed there was a difference. 3 differences were recognized. Firstly, spirituality is defined as a state of being, whereas spiritual health is a state of having. Secondly, spirituality is subjective, while spiritual health is objective. And thirdly, spirituality is potential, while spiritual health is actual. And they concluded that spiritual health is considered to be a product of spirituality. The word spirit is derived from two Latin words, spiritus, meaning breath, courage, vigor, and soul, and spirare, meaning breath, or to breathe. 5 characteristics of spirituality were thought to be: 1, meaning; 2, value; 3, transcendence; 4, connecting with oneself, others, God, and the environment; and number 5, progress and growth in one's spiritual life. Spiritual health, it seems, is all about the 4th spiritual characteristic, connection and its 4 dimensions. And these are, firstly, connection on a personal level with self. Then on a social level, connecting with others. Then man's connection with nature. And finally, the transcendental dimension, connecting with divinity. So let us think about the connection that man has with himself. Does it involve asking such questions as, who am I and what am I doing with my life? Spirituality and spiritual health can only come about when man has recognized that he is not only his body and that there is something more to himself than he previously thought. It is this something that is called soul or spirit. And humankind has a fundamental need to seek this mysterious aspect of itself. Where would he start? It could be with religion, or by practicing yoga or Tai Chi, or by meditation, or by becoming familiar with ancient sacred texts, or even by the study of Theosophy. Whichever path is chosen, it will require discipline, discrimination, and dedication. One sacred text that would be, to my mind, a good start is the Yoga Sutras of the sage Patanjali. He sets out 8 limbs of yoga that, when followed, lead to samadhi. The first 2 limbs are moral codes, which are known as Yama and Niyama. Yama means self-restraint and concerns our connection with other people, and Niyama means self-discipline and concerns our connection with ourselves. We will look at the Niyamas first, as they give us guidelines on connecting with ourselves. There are 5 Niyamas, which are also called observances. And the first is Satya, meaning cleanliness or purity, and can be considered in 2 ways, outer and inner. Outer cleanliness means keeping the physical body bathed and healthy by eating a good diet and taking exercise. And since Yanni's talk, I've added getting enough sleep. Inner cleanliness is achieved by concentration and by having a mind free from thoughts that corrupt or debase. The second niyama is Santosha, or contentment. This is a virtue that is diametrically opposed to our modern consumer mentality, which is driven by the need to acquire more than we really need. Contentment is an expression of renunciation. It also means being able to experience success or failure, pleasure or sorrow with unshakable equanimity and serenity. The third niyama is tapas, meaning austerity. It is a self-discipline that gives the ability to withstand such things as hunger and thirst and extremes of temperature. It is not torture or punishment, mistakenly thought to bring man nearer to God. And in our group this morning, we were mentioning that. Practice of willpower develops strength of character, moral courage, a well-disciplined body, and a balanced, harmonious mind. The fourth niyama is Swatiyaya. This is self-study and involves delving into the hidden meaning of sacred text. The purpose of Swatiyaya is not intellectual learning, but absorption of the ancient wisdom. It also means studying one's progress towards spirituality. And the last niyama is Ishvara Pranidhana, which translates as devotion to the Lord. Ishvara means Lord. It means opening one's heart to the transcendental being, the true self within. Practically, it means accepting the hand of God in every aspect of life and a dedication to all actions, to the divinity within. We now look at the second characteristic of spiritual well-being, the connection with others. It concerns our personal relationships and responsibilities towards other people. To help us understand what this means, we are now going to look at the first of Patanjali's 8 limbs, Yama. And there are, again, are 5 yamas or self-restraints. The first, and I think the most important, is ahimsa, non-violence. This means doing no harm in thought, word, or action, and can be achieved by adopting an attitude of kindness and helpfulness towards others. This is the rule by which Mahatma Gandhi lived. It is not easy to achieve, for one has to be constantly vigilant and aware of one's thoughts, the generators of emotions and actions. Now, the second yama is Satya, which in a negative way translates as non-falsehood, or, and this is my preference, in a positive way, it means truthfulness. It means not saying that what we know to be untrue and to never justify a falsehood or to spread gossip. Madame Blavatsky had this to say about gossip in the Key to Theosophy, and I think this is something that everybody should remember. And this is what she said: but true or false, no accusation against another person should ever be spread abroad. If true, and the fault hurts no one but the sinner, then leave him to his karma. If false, then you will have avoided adding to the injustice in the world. Wise words indeed. Moving on, the third yama is asteya, meaning non-stealing, or to put it positively, honesty and uprightness. As well as not stealing property, it also means not taking others' ideas or words and passing them off as your own. By not coveting what others have, we can become indifferent to possessions, which overall can only lead to happiness for what we actually do have, not to want more. The fourth yama is brahmacharya, meaning non-sensuality and self-restraint in sexual matters. Ernest Wood described it as simple conduct, and it can be considered as moderation and self-control in such things as eating, relationships, and emotions. Now, the last yama, number 5, is Graha. This translates as non-acquisitiveness. It means not being greedy or hoarding things. It could also be thought of as not accepting favors. The important thing to consider is not how much one has, but to use what one has to the best for oneself and others. Together, these 5 yamas constitute the great vow of the Buddha that must be practiced irrespective of place, time, circumstance, or personal status. And you will notice that the practice of one niyama leads quite naturally onto the others. So you don't actually have to think of doing them all, but you start with one and work on that. You will find it naturally leads to the other four. We will now look at the third aspect of spiritual health according to the study, and that is man's connection with nature and the natural world. In ancient times, man was more in touch with nature, for it was to his benefit that he cared for it. Today, we are more likely to abuse it, usually for our own selfish needs. Today, there is much talk about the damage we are doing to the planet we live on, the planet that supports us, that gives us life. And I will be speaking more about the natural world and our connection with it a bit later on in my talk. And the fourth aspect of spiritual health, the study declared to be man's transcendental connection with divinity. Does this mean becoming a member of a religious community and worshipping a god or gods? I think not. For to me, it means looking to the God within ourselves. The inner God does not require to be worshipped, only to be recognized as the eternal life, the life that cannot be extinguished, and that is unchanging. How do we recognize this eternal life? By using our intelligent minds and by developing four qualities, which are discernment of what is lasting and valuable. And in Sanskrit, this is Viveka. And the second quality to develop is to adopt relative indifference to everything else, Vairaga in Sanskrit. The third quality is tranquility of mind, Shama in the Sanskrit. And lastly is a burning desire for liberation from suffering, Mumukshata in Sanskrit. So we're going to look at these very, very briefly. The first is Viveka, discernment, meaning the ability to distinguish between the eternal and the transient. Only that which is permanent can bring happiness. In the classic teaching texts, we are told only Brahman does not change. Even God, conceived as a creator and sustainer of the world, is subject to change. Then comes Vairaga. That can be translated as equanimity or detachment from our emotions and a controlling mind. It does not imply a lack of feeling or that we cannot receive enjoyment from life. The third quality to be developed is Shama, or tranquility of the mind. And this takes resourcefulness, endurance, patience, and one-pointedness. And lastly, we come to mumukshata, or desire for liberation from suffering. It is the will to be free of the illusion that we are defined by the limitations of our body, of our mind and our emotions, and to gain direct knowledge of our true self. When these sacred qualities have been achieved, we can say we have spiritual well-being. Now, slight change of subject. I was given a book for Christmas in 1991 by a friend who wrote in the front that unless he was mistaken, I would find it fascinating reading. He was not mistaken, for the book he gave me was called Gaia, the Practical Science of Planetary Medicine by James Lovelock. Now, he's been mentioned twice so far this week, and first by Gary, who informed us that at the age of 103, he has recently died. In the book, the author explains his Gaia hypothesis, which is that our planet is a living entity. He asks if it is well, and then examines it as if it were a sick patient. To the scientists of the day, the theory of Earth as a living entity that could experience both health and disease was unacceptable and disputed, and he and his collaborator Lynn Margulis were publicly discredited by a small but vociferous group of biologists and science writers. Some of you may remember that time. And in the magazine Science in April 1991, Lovelock and his Gaia hypothesis were denounced as being, and I quote, unscientific, dangerous, and pure fantasy. All the established powers balked at the Earth being described as alive. To Lovelock, the Earth is alive because it behaves like a living organism to the extent that temperature and chemical composition are actively kept constant in the face of agitation, homeostasis, we were thinking about earlier. He says that he is using the Gaia theory to look at the planet in a different way. At that time, in the early 90s, many people must have thought his theory strange, but some recognition and 30 years on, it is accepted by many people. Lovelock was not the first to consider the Earth in this way, but the scientist James Hutton, who lived from 1726 to 1797, is considered as the father of the science of geology, called the Earth a self-regulating superorganism, and that is in the 18th century, a self-regulating superorganism. He saw life and its material environment as a single system, an entity that is alive, at least to the extent that, like other living organisms, its chemistry and temperature are self-regulated at a stable state favorable for life. Lovelock describes Gaia as a control system similar to a thermostat on a domestic iron or an oven, and as an evolving system made from all living things and their surface environment, the oceans, atmosphere, and crystal rocks. It is a system that has evolved over millennia without foresight or planning being involved. The Gaia hypothesis went against the conventional wisdom of the day that sees the Earth as a dead planet made of inanimate rocks, ocean, and atmosphere merely inhabited by life. Lovelock recognized the effect humankind has had on the health of our planet, which 30 plus years on is even more in evidence. Everyone these days cannot fail to be aware of rising temperatures, the melting ice caps, the destruction of tropical forests, and the greater frequency of extreme weather conditions. Not to mention the movements and people trying to change the ever downward spiral of destruction of our lovely planet. 40 years or more ago, the scientists, politicians, and environmentalists were concerned about the damage to the environment due to the emission of greenhouse gases. However, their concern was not so much for the planet, but rather for the good of humanity, a selfish and short-sighted attitude, which I'm pleased to say has gradually changed over the years. Lovelock saw Gaia as a sacred place of reverence, and I'm sure we will agree. Which of us has not been overawed by the beauty of Mother Nature? Whether it be the view from the top of a mountain, rugged coastal scenery, a waterfall, dappled sunlight on a forest floor, a sunset or a sunrise, and the songs of the birds greeting a new day. Compare these with the ugliness of open-cast mines, the deliberate destruction of forests giving way to acres of palm trees with no biodiversity, all done for profit. There is, to me, a difference between man-made destruction and that which happens naturally, like earthquakes and other natural events, which over time will heal. Instead of destroying our beautiful planet for our own selfish gain, we should act as custodians and stewards of Earth. There is a balance to be had, for by looking after our home, we are safeguarding the future of our species. Gaia, the name of the Greek goddess of the earth, seemed to Lovelock to be the correct name for his hypothesis, which he first considered in 1965. And he calls the science of Gaia geophysiology, the holistic science of living systems such as the earth. Just because the earth cannot reproduce like animals does not mean that it's not alive. As Theosophist, I would assume that we have no problem with accepting the Gaia hypothesis as fact, for we know that everything is a form of life and that has a level of consciousness from the most inanimate, such as a stone, to the most animate, such as ourselves. As Theosophists, we know that all life is one. We accept there is unity in diversity. We can see beyond the differences that make this world of ours such an interesting and stimulating place in which to live. So let us recall the quotations from the Bhagavad Gita that I used at the beginning of my talk. The man who lives in self-harmony finds wisdom and truth in his soul. And let the wise man work unselfishly for the good of the world. And see if we cannot live up to these prudent and inspiring words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jenny, for a beautiful, informative and heartfelt talk and a real call to our hearts and our love for our planet. Thank you.